we're not, we're not like, okay, maybe you're looking at an end result saying, well, America's in there meddling and fucking with, and it's not doing anything that's beneficial. It's screwing more things up, but we need our position in the world, you say. And for me, I'm saying, no, we're not fucking up. When we meddle in it, we're meddling in it in order to control the actual function and policy, and that we're successful at that.
I think you're right in summarizing our judicial position, but if you were to take that position that says that we have meddled and succeeded in taking control, that is to say that every single president, every single White House cabinet, every single congressional policy has been in unison, and that has definitely not been the case. You know, it's that there's one purpose in going out into the world, which is to seize control. And there's no way that's happening.
Well,
every congressman, every senator, every advisor to the president, every president, every vice president, every Department of Defense, everybody's got their pet issue. And in fact, I think that's why we're involved in Venezuela as it is right now, because of one senator, Marco Rubio, who got in Trump's ear and said, hey, he's been in his ear. You know, we need to be down here. We need to walk here. We need to do this. We need to do this. We need to do this. And finally, Trump just seized on it, I'm guessing, because it looks like it would be good PR for him to actually do something that looks kind of winnable in his eyes. So, that is, again, it's just the complexity of the situation of why we get involved in things. There's not a single-minded purpose behind it.
Okay.
America's capitalism is good, and that we need to, blame that on Facebook. It sounds more like Facebook than it does the American government.
Well, okay, so my pushback on that description, right? Because my thought on the matter is that kind of like what constitutes a definition of America, right? Or what you could say, oh well, the history of America, like written and taught to the kids, or something about our freedom and rights, or our definition, right? But then when I'm trying to deductively take elements that they're seemingly disparate in terms of like, hey, every congressperson is different, right? Every representative and every president and every cabinet is different. The whole idea is, what is it that they all share, right? Like, what is it that they share that people outside of the country don't necessarily share, right? So my notion...
Right, so that's your assessment, is that they all share this common trait of meddling successfully in other people's countries to gain control.
No. Meaning that's the meddling is the second. The first is hang on one sec. Hey Cole, what'd you say? You're moving stuff somewhere? Is that what you said?
Out here.
You're moving stuff out here. Watch your fingers.
Forever.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, I've been at this. Been putting this guy up for a couple weeks, and he's slowly moving stuff out, which is cool because it was time. Anyway, no, my overarching the shared thing. The thing I keep deductively coming down to is what supports the organisms, right? Meaning, if you live in the U.S., and you have any clout, what are some things that define you as having clout? And I think, okay, well, it's having money and it's speaking English. Those seem to be the first clout bases of almost any country. If you're in Russia, to have clout, you have to have rubles and you have to speak Russian. All right, and so I start with the idea of what are the most prime things that are motivating human policy. Like a lot of what's going on in Congress is about the allocation of money and the allocation of resources down to the state level, and then policy of, oh, what are we going to do with criminals, or what are we going to do with welfare, or what are we going to do with anything. I mean, any policy, from abortion rights to charter schools or whatever, right? And I'm like, okay, so the majority of things, so secondarily to being able to speak English and have the medium of exchange is then virtues. What's the virtue of a charter school over a public school? What's the virtue of a private prison over a public prison? What's the virtue of the sanctity of life versus the woman's right to choose, or something to that effect, right? And what's the virtue of any political disagreement? And so in my mind, the most rudimentary thing beyond the language is the medium of exchange. How is value from one organism to the other beyond the language reserved? And I'm like, well, it's money. I mean, that's kind of what I boiled it down to, right? And you could say, well, it's virtue, and I could say, okay, well, it's money, right? And anyway, and so my whole point is then, okay, so then I start deducing or using an inductive process of who controls the money and how are they controlling the money. And then it becomes an analysis of the institutions that are moving loans, using credit, and using workforce, using labor to develop, right? And so kind of like you threw out the word postmodern, but you were using it in terms of questioning truth. But postmodernism now is lauded against Marxist theory, which I think has got its own problems, but it's still that idea that your time and your behavior is manipulated for what you agree and what the general spectrum of what the value of one's bodily movement and activity is worth relative to anything, right? Like you believe if you're contented with your job, that's because your organism suffices within a certain aspect of how it relates to what labor means in order to get this particular value back in the form of money. And so I'm just thinking, okay, if that's at root, right, if what's at root is the idea of a contented organism, relative to the value of their labor and having access to perform such labor, right, then it becomes an analysis at that point of who's controlling the money, how's it controlled, where's it being displaced, and which countries are using it, and in what way is the population not content. And so my belief is that the introduction of the Fed and the introduction of the petrodollar and our continued toppling and requirements of foreign governments to adopt this, right? And some of them we don't find viable. We don't, particularly like Sudan will come onto the radar fairly soon, right? As the next country that we will need to inculcate their use of the monetary system such that it benefits the way Israel and the U.S. are, and or whoever you believe are the controlling powers of the U.S. petrodollar. That's my starting point, right? So I assume everything else comes from there, and then any policy arguments are extensions from the premise that the control of language and the control of the movement of the labor dollar is in place, right? And that's the whole idea of tariffs and embargoes on other countries that have competing currency. that we don't want China to buy up too much land in Africa, right? We're okay if they do business with us because that's huge investments within the dollar, right? But it's everything seems as if it's competing on currency, and so that's my starting point. But I'm not certain. But and maybe you think that as me trying to boil down a primacy of how things are actually moving is wrong-headed because of all the differences of all the Congress people and the cabinets and the presidents and so forth. But for me, that I was like, what is common and what's not common? And it came down to common language and common currency, and then everything else was a derivative from there in my mind. And
so under looking into the premise, does that make you feel like you've got it all solved?
no, meaning, God, should I say I have it all solved? Well, it kind of comes down to what extent does it mean to be an American have anything to do with controlling the resources of another country? Like I think we're
your answer.
Well, yeah, meaning that's the question, and the answer is like I think it's U.S. business practices and credit practices that are literally causing the rainforests to be demolished. I think the U.S. is culpable in more global devastation than I would have assumed otherwise. Meaning, I'm basically saying colonialism yielded into a type of currency dominance, and it's currency dominance now. And if you conflate colonialism with American interests and American interests with currency interests, then all those three are devastating the whole planet. If we retracted, I think the other countries now are more they were more inclusive to taking care of their own people, but as soon as the U.S. I mean, we've always been at war with different nations and different countries in some capacity, and we've gotten along the way that we do. But I would say now they have an interest in expansion. Like I think, like Russia wants Ukraine back, right? Russia wants its interaction in South America, and China wants its purchase of land in both the U.S. and in Africa, right? Like now the other countries have international expansion.
Hold on.
Go ahead.
So what did you know about why we got in the war in Vietnam?
Well, there were competing arguments with that, but my whole head flipped when I started to learn more about the geography landscape. But somebody even said it came down to the president's interests in an airport that they wanted to establish in one of the Vietnamese countries, and that there was some sort of backlash, and that caused the first threat against the country. And somebody else said, no, it was a humanitarian crisis that we needed to invade. But to be honest, I don't know where my foot lays on the history of Vietnam, so I'll claim ignorance.
You should watch Ken Burns' documentary on Vietnam. It's awesome.
Okay.
But there isn't an easy answer as to why we got involved in Vietnam. It wasn't a one. It's not a one answer solution. Again, the war covered three different presidencies. You know, one got it started in there, but each successive president kept us in there.
Mm-hmm.
But I think from what I have gathered, it was just fear of communism. and they feared that if Vietnam fell to the communists, the entire region would fall to communism.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was really important to the U.S. to make sure that didn't happen.
Sure.
So that's why we got into war. So, I mean, that, I guess, could be an economic argument.
Well, I mean, we turned Japan into our capitalistic society. They've been fine. We turned South Korea. We blocked them off in the 38th parallel. The commies, right? And so that was going to, and I think we wanted to make certain that, certain claim of land down there was of a business interest for us to make certain the future of that country was not under some sort of dictatorship. And so, meaning the virtues of American capitalism on the face, on the mid-level optic, is it's very good. It's yielded, I think, more prosperity and more freedom overall in those countries as far as how we are. But then, okay, I'll throw this to you, meaning you by arguing, let's say, okay, you hate Trump and you think women need to move ahead seriously, and you probably believe in the intersectional politics generally, and more sophisticatedly than the average bear, I would say. And yet, a lot of people would criticize leftist politics as being more aligned or one-to-one connected with socialism and communism, if you wanted to conflate the two, right? And so then you would be saying, well, like if you say, oh, I think Americanism is good globally, meaning to the extent that it's helped, and that's, let's say, external to the nation. Internally, domestically in the nation, you might find a level of hypocrisy if there wasn't some sort of, I mean, meaning I don't know to what, like I do know because I think I get it. I guess I'm trying to formulate a question to you. Like, do you find that your domestic politic runs roughshod of the virtues of your global politic?
No, and I get what you're trying to say. You're trying to point out a discrepancy here, but
because mine will run.
Our Americanism is, it's really hard for me to. I've been listening to your arguments and your commonalities of what an American is defined by this business interest in capital gains and capitalistic moves. It's hard for me to I can agree with just that part, but I think there's a lot more to being American than just the money makes us. So it's hard for me to say that our interest in these different places in the world, that it is just because control and power and money interest. I do agree that money is a major player, probably money and power. I think power has a lot to do with it too. Money leads to power, but you don't need, if you're already powerful, you don't necessarily need money, you know. But a lot of what has aligned us acting in the world is to maintain our power. And so where I understand what you're trying to say is that, you know, being the liberal that I am, and the leftist that I am, that there are some socialistic tendencies that I definitely agree with, and that should be used domestically, that run roughshod, where it runs roughshod is, we can go back to our Venezuela argument and say, I would love it if the U.S. sent food, which they have, to the border, or to the people in Venezuela, so that they don't have to starve to death. They can't afford to buy food in their country because their economy is so fucked up. I would love to be able to send them food and medicine and, even maybe send over our American businessmen to help them set up businesses and get their foot in the ground, but you've got to have a good leader there that allows that all to happen, or it won't happen at all. So I think it's not a socialist argument. I don't think it's a capitalist argument. I think there's pros and cons of both of them. And I think a lot of people, and I'm in agreement, that we're on the downside of capitalism. Capitalism is on an arch, and it's reached its apex, and it's falling down on the downside now. And so socialism has to come into play after that to fix things. So.
Well, what do you think? I mean, it'd be interesting to hear if you were to track just not the political regime in power in Venezuela, but the financial history and relationships of whatever the Venezuelan exchange, unit of exchange is, whatever their quote unquote dollar is, right? Like whatever.
Do you know what it is right now? They have the highest rate of inflation, I think, in the world right now.
Right,
it's out of control. Like a loaf of bread is like $500 US dollars now or something.
Right.
Out of the ordinary.
What do you think? What do you think? I mean, I'm just curious of what your concept of modern currency is about. Meaning, do you, or modern colonialism? And it's so weird because I don't want to pin it to colonialism per se, but I kind of want to say colonialism as a start in terms of the English Empire in India, the English Empire in Northern Africa and in Africa, the English Empire in the United States, and then the United States Empire wherever the United States Empire is, right? And I don't know. I think what I'm getting at is even the attempt to globalize English, right, is a type of power play, right? And it's also good for business, but it's good for business where the majority of the interest of the business still comes back to those who speak English. Meaning, I don't want to.
Yeah, but it might be Chinese now.
Well, it may be Chinese. I don't know whether or not more Venezuelan people speak English than they do Chinese. They probably speak Spanish, I would assume, more than anything. But in terms of their secondary, the most, I mean, we could really get together and try to Google and argue through it. But basically, my thoughts are, right, is that kind of like that. I think it's probably a few hundred years old, or at least a couple hundred years old, basically. But I really think the expansion of kind of like Spain and the Mayans and the everybody that conquered South America, right? Like there's this kind of standardization of euro. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm trying to undergird everything with the history of what it means to take a native population of Mayans or Aztecs in South America and convert them to a Eurocentric means of doing business, speaking, functioning, so forth. Like to me, the colonialism and the influence of Europe globally has already kind of transpired. Like, it's already pretty much done its job. There's very few, like there's probably zero. My argument would be, in the United States, there is zero indigenous native populations that live the majority of their life off the grid. Where in South America, Brazil, maybe Middle America, there's still some indigenous tribes that are not, that they still try to exclude themselves from what's happening on a global level. And so, anyway, my whole point is to undergird the argument and say that the very idea of what an economy is and how an economy is supposed to function around an individual currency is already tainted by colonialism. Meaning at some point we expanded the idea of a dollar and an exchange, and in international exchanges. Like, very few countries have a currency that their currency is not exchangeable. And I mean that on an internet basis and not on an in-person basis. I don't know. Anyway, maybe I'm being too theoretical, but my whole point is that yeah, like when there was some other country in Africa where they had buckets loads of cash because the inflation was way too high, and I thought this almost has to occur in some country around the globe, because there has to be some one scapegoated country that's got to eat shit in order for us to continue. Meaning capitalism requires that there's a scapegoat. There's got to be a loser, and so there's always got to be one country that's excessively losing. And I think that it's.
But what if you're not a capitalistic country?
Well, that's what I meant by I think the Eurocentrism in terms of its money makes a country kind of when I say capitalistic, I mean printed money. I mean the idea that they have a dollar bill, a paper bill in exchange, meaning that to me demarks a form of capitalism.
Gotcha.
Meaning that it's holding capital value and that it's propagated relative to an overarching business structure or landscape. But not capitalism in like comparing capitalism to socialism. But in other words, I think. Oh, I don't know. I don't know what to say. All I'm saying is I think that Venezuela. We're trying to put in who we can so we can extract the most business out of the country, but we're also dilapidating it. And I think that culture now in the U.S. and in Europe, and the migrations that are occurring globally normally from south to north, are causing like it's indifferent to the people that are trying to make a buck off of it. As long as they can get away with making the buck, then mix the populations and throw everything together, because apparently, if a population isn't breeding enough or it isn't yielding enough labor, then you got to bring in more activity to spice up kind of a dead economy. So it's like, bring in this, and then it'll generate more behavior, more economic activity will occur. The more population you have, and then you'll have more pockets, and kind of like, I don't know. This is my theory, though. Is I think.
Well, what's the other solution? If it's not money, what is the solution then to help these countries
are in trouble? Well, my thoughts are kind of anti-foreign intervention. I mean, the problem is like I said, now China and Russia or the other countries with major power will pick up where the U.S. doesn't pick up in terms of influencing an economy in their favor. And because that's the new international gridlock, I don't know what the best thing is. But I also think that maybe I'm wrong there, and that the U.S. pulled its interests out internationally or quit meddling in trying to solve a problem, but quit trying to lend credit to countries like Iran is like, we're trying to move more money in currency, like the Iran deal and dropping all that currency into that country. It was both supposedly a philanthropy idea, but it was also a use idea. The more U.S. dollars that are trading there, the more the value of the U.S. then inculcates that closed-off country. So it was a type.
So it has nothing to do with them and their nuclear weapons that they were trying to build.
I think that was just ancillary. I think fucking Israel has more nukes to pop off against Iran than anything. Meaning make it a deal, sure. But my thoughts on Iran was that it was still a means of getting their closed off country to start using U.S. dollars. Because we printed our dollar. Why did we not print their dollar and drop it off there? Why did we not give them an infusion?
That doesn't make any sense, though. We had sanctions against Iran, which means that we didn't allow anybody to trade with them. And if you did, there were penalties. And then they signed the Iran nuclear deal, which Trump just pulled out of recently, which listed those sanctions. So, but for years before that, there was Iran was facing economic hardship. So are you saying that, and it wasn't just the U.S. who signed on to that, that was all, like 17 different countries or something signed on to that.
Well, if I say I think they started suffering hardships about 40 years ago. Prior to that, Iran, in terms of the videos that are pulled out, seemed as if it was fairly successful and actually fairly modern. And
right, but their downfall was their own too. Was their own.
No, why would you say that?
Because they elected ultra-conservative people who are not elected, but the ultra-conservative people got into power and removed a lot of the freedoms that they had.
But is that not, that was a U.S. move? I mean, as far, meaning my belief.
That was not a U.S. move.
No, that we unplugged their Shah and put in our own, and then every time they get somebody we don't want, we're in there meddling once again. We're in there injecting them.
Yeah, I think you should double check your facts again on that.
Well, anyway,
brush up on our history of Iran.
My thoughts are, as soon as the West as soon as the U.S. tried to press its financial interests on the country and control the policies of that country, that's when they became an axis of evil necessarily to the U.S.
I would double check that.
Well, that's fine. I'll let you. I mean, I can attempt to. I mean, I just watch the media that comes by me, but I will click on anything that says Iran or Iranian history. But I would let you double check on America's influence in Iran's premiers and Iran's Ayatollah and the controlling interests of Iran.
I agree that we've definitely had a obsessive unhealthy interest with what's going on in Iran. That I would be ignorant of me to say that we haven't done very damaging things over there.
Well, and that's because you asked what's the answer, and my answer is quit fucking around with these pocketed countries. Just because we can't see what they're doing behind closed doors and we want to get in everyone's fucking shit, like.
Yeah, but that's such an easy answer.
It's a very answer.
Say, well, they want to be closed off, let them be closed off. But especially when it comes again to the politics going on in the Middle East, it is not a one-answer solution. It goes back to the tribal feuds that have been waging on forever there, and it's way too complicated.
But that's not.
Certainly take a back seat and just say, hey, you guys figure it out.
Why shouldn't that? So you'd pull the humanitarian card as a reason to go, like, take care of their
I don't think it's
disputes?
a humanitarian card. And I'm not going to be able to speak articulately enough, but just from the information that I have absorbed on the subject of the Middle East, that it's incredibly complicated, and that we have gotten involved, we've done a lot of stupid things, but maybe we've done some okay things, maybe we've done nothing at all, but I'm not really sure. I'm also not really sure in both directions that we should be there and we should not be there, you know?
Well,
I don't know. I would hate, I don't think it's the right answer to just build a wall around our country and just say we're going to only deal with our own problems and not the problems of the world. So.
Well, and I'm not summing it up. Our building a wall. I'm not talking about that. But I mean, when you said what's the answer, I mean, obviously it's there's many dynamics that go into anything, and that there's got to be solutions. But for the most part, my answer would be, anti-foreign intervention, and put that as an ism, right? Because I think the U.S. empire is and has been and will continue to be thwarted, or it will continue its expansion like we're playing a big game of Risk globally, and that the pressure's on, the heat's on, it's already at play. We're playing this big old Risk game, and
so what about countries that meddle in with us? I mean, do we just say, well, settle away then? We can't do that.
Well, we have plenty of propaganda against it, but I mean, the feedback on how much we're being meddled with seems as if it's media meddling. I don't know how much financial meddling there's been. I'm sure there's been some, but if it's media meddling, then that's part of the language. That becomes a matter of the semantics, not actually like nobody's coming in and pulling down a lever on someone's vote. If you're talking about Russian meddling in the U.S., that type of thing. But as far as like the idea, like Trump saying, oh, China's got all these benefits and they're stealing our intellectual property, and they've been getting away for a long time. Like when he says that, I have sympathies for that, because I think, they are stealing all the intellectual property. And in one way, I almost want the U.S. to start just like loosen the laws restricting the thievery of intellectual property. I almost think intellectual property needs to be released almost after just a couple years or a few years. There shouldn't be a monopoly held. There shouldn't be patents held. There shouldn't be copyrights held. Like if we are going to move into a global economy as a virtue of a global system, then maybe China's thievery of intellectual property has some sort of basis. So I'm not certain how they're going to clamp down on that, because it seems as if, I don't know, meaning I think that the internet is exposing everything to intellectual property. And so anyone can gather almost anything that they want, you would think. I believe. And so if that's the case, then I think that needs to be reworked. But I don't know. Maybe I should just run for president on I don't know. Let me in. Let the schizoid in. He's going to talk a weird game. But, this lady on the way back from Istanbul, I was on a plane, and she was this Muslim lady or ex-Muslim, drinking a beer next to me, and she said, the Iran deal with Obama was really a good thing, because she said in Iran, they're not allowed to have a credit system, right? Meaning they don't have Visas and MasterCards. They have no means of getting credit, and their economy is set still. And at the time, I thought, God, that really makes sense. Like, they would need an infusion if the population didn't have any ability to leverage anything into the future, such as a credit. And in retrospect, I thought, well, that's really the notion that we maintain in the States, where we live in a deficit. We're a creditor nation now. We're a deficit nation. And now somehow we want other countries to also be indebted to help us pay off our debt. Like, and that's the whole point, right? Is that we're trying to make certain, and I think the powers that be are trying to make certain that the world remains indebted to whatever is at the top of the hierarchy, controlling the greater businesses and the greater policies and the greater controllers of the Fed. To me, that's the eye of the pyramid that needs to be stabbed out. That's what the empire is about, is moving all that money upward, and that now the left is basically just using scapegoating anything that looks like expansionism of the white cis male, or anything that's orthodox. It's let's scramble this up and rework it. But really, what everyone's trying to take upon themselves is the controlling aspect of the empire. And since everything's a cloak and dagger game behind that, like, we somehow think the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, CIA, and Homeland Security is something positive. Like, we think that's really great, but it's a pile of fucking shit. It's a pile of unilateral control. And I'm not saying, whoa, we don't have, Catch Me As You Can with Tom Hanks as an FBI guy, and we, boy, that's a really great film showing how we caught that rebel. There's all this, there's plenty of movies that show the positive aspect of, the CIA comes in and saves the day, and the police come in and save the day. But they're the ones that are, like, our intelligence agency as such. We might say, it's a necessary evil, but I never want to get to the point where we don't think that in fact is in fact the evil. Like, I don't want to get to the point where we're going, yes, like, even all the criticisms against Trump, you don't trust our own CIA information or our own demographics, and he says no. Like, I'm not. It's not like I'm agreeing that he shouldn't pay attention to it, but my idea is, like, okay, the people behind the scenes, like, for him to separate himself off, he is doing something unprecedented by defaming them. Like, he does this with everything. He shoots a spitball against it, and then he bonds with it. Kim Jong-un, he's the short man, he's the little man, now they're best of friends. Everybody's got the negative and the positive. Everything's going on in this back and forth. That's how he wants it. And so he's doing that same thing with the intelligence agency. But anyway, my whole point is that we somehow have been so brought up into the idea of lauding positive connotations towards our intelligence agency. And in fact, I think they're single-handedly probably the biggest support groups of the powers that be in terms of worldwide domination and currency control. And
wow, well, that's a bold statement.
I think it's a very bold statement, because some people would say that's anti-American, and I'm like, well, and I'm not even for the troops. I'm not going to say.
I think that you're right about there being powers that be, but I think that saying that the CIA is responsible for it is a little bit misguided. It really probably is something more that you actually hit on, which is just American business interests.
Yeah, well, like this morning I was watching the history of credit, not the history, but what credit default swaps are. And we have derivatives, we have interest swaps, we have credit default swaps, we have all this way of formulating a contract on a bet and to hold our card house together and our financial system together. And yet it's now that everything's just a digitized form of money, where the digits can be thrown around from powers that be to bank accounts and players. It's as if there's no accountability. And somebody suggested on one of these videos, they said the basis of the money shouldn't be on gold anymore. Maybe it should be on environmental impact, or on something. We have to back currency to something tangible again. And without that, everything is just a matter of contracts and defeat. We overexpand credit. We dilapidate the country, right? This is what I think is going on in Venezuela. We dilapidate their financial institution, make them basically financial slaves. Then we inculcate them with credit. As soon as we get them in credit, then we're able to leverage the entire country. We've contracted with the entire country. We distribute credit throughout the country to help them come out of this huge recession. We put in our power player to make certain that that's going to happen, and then we own that country from now until the U.S. falls off of the petrodollar. And we keep everybody, and we're doing it domestically too. We lower the interest rates to get a little bit of buoyancy. Then people take out more credit. Then we raise the interest rates, which then maintain the debt, and now everyone's trying to pay off the debt at a higher interest rate. That's why they skip from 3 to 4% to 21% in 12 months. It's that whole idea of, if you're not really responsible, you're going to get fucked. It's the same reason why you can't do bankruptcy on a student loan. It's perma debt. And we're doing it domestically to our own population. We're doing it internationally to other populations. And when I say us, I mean the powers that be that are running the money. And that's what that. And if you tell me it's anyone else, if it's Congress doesn't have the power of the Fed. You know, give me the powers of the currency, and I don't care what the laws are in the country. That sort of quote, I can't remember where it comes from. But somebody saying, if you give me access, if you let me control the banks, I don't care what the laws are.
Hey, you should look at Elizabeth Warren and her. Have you looked into her?
I used to look into her, but I haven't looked into her lately.
You should.
What for? What's she on about?
Well, she's running for president, and she has a lot of opinions about the economy and our involvement in the role of all these institutions.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just think you probably find some common ground with her.
Well, I used to. I mean, during the last election, my hope was that it was going to be a Bernie Warren ticket, because I really got into her 2 years ago, but I don't know how anything's changed. And now all I can think about is how are they going to be presented on stage, and what's going on in terms of propaganda, and the whole Pocahontas thing, and the, hey everyone, look, I'm going to open a beer with my husband sort of thing. It's like she's talking less about policy, and she's trying to, like, I don't know, she's taking a lot of heat, and so I don't know if she's recoverable. But I think her policies overall are really great. I just don't know whether or not she's actually got a chance to make a dent. I mean, I would like maybe Warren.
Well, in your worldview, it doesn't sound like anybody has a chance. So,
well,
I don't know, maybe not.
No, I mean, mine, this Gabby, Tulsi Gabbard, I think, meaning I personally back everything that I'm hearing about her. She's catching a lot of flack, and these other people are saying, now look, even NBC is trying to trash and misappropriate her, information about her, and they're really trying to nail her on an anti-gay stance she had at some point in her past. There was some things they were really hitting her on, but I figured it was all. Everything's a trash job. And so, since Trump is he's at least the king shit thrower, that was the only positive thing, is that he could talk trash like no one else. And I thought, the way he branded, I mean, just the whole Jeb Bush low energy thing, small Rubio, like the way, crooked Hillary, just the way he ripped through everyone with a bash, a roast, first and foremost. And Warren now is Pocahontas, and so it's this idea of not we don't need to worry about the Russian meddling. It's now who's going to be able to stand up to Trump as the best shit talker, or who's going to be a shining example where if anything was lauded against them, it would fall off of them like Teflon. Because there's still that nobility in government, and Trump's knocked through the nobility thing. So I don't know, what's your prediction? Do you think he's going to win another one, or you think there's going to be a rising star? Or you want to be a part of my election campaign?
I don't think he's going to be a rising star. I don't think he's going to win next election. I think whoever's going to be in power is going to be someone to reckon with. So, but hey, I gotta go. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Irma. We've been at it for 50 minutes, and I lectured hard.
It's okay. We were going good at it, but I do need to get on with my errands for the day.
Okay. Well, next time let's just catch up on non-politics. But
is there anything else?
Yeah. Is there anything else?
All right, but no, it was good talking to you, and we'll continue on another time.
Okay. Have a good one, Kristen.
All right, bye.
Bye. And so to finish my discussion, my roommate is leaving. Finally, he's moving out. My most local politic is how I live at my place. In a bit of a wreck, a bit of an acidic wreck, and then everything else is projections of what's going on in terms of local politics, state politics, country politics, international politics, the whole consideration of the whole gamut of what might be going on globally. Because we have intelligence agencies, because we have control of financial systems, and because we have Americana and the virtues of America, these are all great things, but the hypocrisy is that we have military contracts, we have manifest destiny imperialism for the globe. It seems as if we still attempt to solidify a type of normative global hegemony. That's the role. We've already inculcated even into China in business. They wear business suits now. They have a hybrid dictator and capitalistic system. They've migrated for certain allowances. I mean, shit. We're all in this mad, wide world together and apart from each other and with our varying differences. So what to do, what to make of it, and what are the best policies to implement, right? Can the cherry picker party, my party, connotations towards sexuality and cherry picking, can the cherry picker party appropriately augment and select from various policies virtuous new policies to put forth? Meaning, is corporate pay reform, is patent law release reduction, is Medicaid, Medicare, universal basic income. Are these things laudable ideas? Should they be in place? Some contented homeless people in San Francisco, right? Doesn't get too extra cold. It gets cold, but not like in Utah, right? Not like in Chicago, right? But apparently the homeless population in San Francisco is considered an international crisis, humanitarian crisis. But it's not talked about as such, more about bringing to the forefront focuses on immigration and cherry picking from vast swaths of millions of Mexican immigrants and scapegoating the acts of a few as justification for what is going on with the idea of building a wall. Although I do not disagree, your nation should have borders, whether those are diffuse borders or discrete borders. That's the difference between the modern left on this and Trump's campaign. That being said, how to both engage the interests of the West and pursue a paradigm of policies that moves a more cohesive future for all. That's the big question, right? If we're on a globe, you'd think the waters of economy could settle over each population, where every country was its own whirlpool and it traded on its borders. But the control of currency and then currency manipulation seems to be most problematic. Hopefully with new tech, translation tech, we can countries can get back to their languages of their origin, and we can only they won't be inculcated with the burden of facilitating a business paradigm brought on part and parcel by speaking English. And I don't want to say English is the business language of the world, but in one way I think it's obvious that they're the conquering language. And so new technology should allow, I would imagine, the need for not necessarily having your population learn foreign tongues, and kind of there'll be a reapproach towards one's country's mother tongue as focus. I don't know. It's an interesting future to see how we enfold ourselves, encapsulate ourselves into pockets, and then how, like shellfish, we might open up and become global. So there's always seems to be some sort of hypocrisy or irony in the idea of what kind of like as we globalize, we also seclude. As we connect outward, we find our individual differences. Those types of things. What to do? How to engage. How to engage powerfully and meaningfully, and with purpose, and with policy, and with implementation, and with a means of actually saving the planet and the people of the planet, organisms of the planet. How to repeal the things that are damaging the Mother Earth while adapting our organism through new technologies genetics, so forth, in order to have a survivability. Thank you for listening. And if I do run for anything, you gotta back me, or criticize me, or educate me.